Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Astotra Satashishiman. Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajacharya Stotra Satasi Shrimad. His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Vishnu. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Garga Uvacha Yadunam Aham Acharya Kyatas Cha Bhuvi Sarvada Sutam Maya Samskritam Te Manyate Devaki Sutam Sri Garga Uvacha Yadunam Aham Acharya Kyatascha Bhuvi Sarvada Sutam Maya Samskritam Te Manyate Devaki Sutam Sri Garga Uvacha Yadunam Aham Acharya Kyatascha Bhuvi Sarvada Sutam Maya Samskritam Te Manyate Devaki Sutam.
Shri Garga Vacha Yaduna Mahacharya Yatasya Bhumi Sarvada Sudhamaya Samskritante Manyate Devaki Sutam Shri Garga Vacha Yaduna Mahacharya Yatasya Bhumi Sarvada Sudhamaya Samskritante Manyate Devaki Sutam
Vaishnavis.
Shri Garga Vacha Yaduna Mahacharya Yatasya Bhumi Sarvada Sudhamaya Samskritante Manyate Devaki Sutam Shri Garga Vacha Yaduna Mahacharya Yatasya Bhumi Sarvada Sudhamaya Samskritante Manyate Devaki Sutam Shri Garga Vacha Yaduna Mahacharya Yatasya Bhumi Sarvada Sudhamaya Samskritante Manyate Devaki Sutam
Shri Garga Uvacha. Garga Muni said, Yadunam of the Yadu dynasty, Aham, I am, Acharyaha, the priestly guide, or Purohit, Kyatacha, this is already known, Bhuvi, everywhere, Sarvada, always, Sutam, the sun, Maya, by me, Samskritam, having undergone the purificatory process, Te, of you, Manyate, would be considered, Devaki Sutam, the son of Devaki. Translation. Garga Muni said, My dear Nanda Maharaj, I am the priestly guide of the Yadu dynasty. This is known everywhere. Therefore, if I perform the purificatory process for your sons, Kamsa will consider them the sons of Devaki. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Garga Muni indirectly disclosed that Krishna was the son of Devaki, not of Yashoda. Since Kamsa was already searching for Krishna, if the purificatory process were undertaken by Garga Muni, Kamsa might be informed, and that would create a catastrophe. It may be argued that although Garga Muni was the priest of the Yadu dynasty, Nanda Maharaj also belonged to that dynasty. Nanda Maharaj, however, was not acting as a kshatriya. Therefore Garga Muni said, if I act as your priest, this will confirm that Krishna is the son of Devaki. Om Ajnana Timarandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I first ask for the blessings of the senior Vaishnavas that I may speak properly, and the Gaudiya Vaishnav Siddhanta is given to us by our Srila Prabhupada. So we are continuing with Garga Muni coming to Vrindavan on the inspiration of Vasudeva, to do the naming ceremony of Krishna, the purificatory process, the Samskritam for Krishna. And I would actually like to go revisit a verse 2, where Garga Muni is described as a Dokshaja. And I thought that this is such a powerful point to understand. The Garga Muni, Nanda Maharaj could appreciate that Garga Muni was a Dokshaja. That is, he was not an ordinary person seen by material senses. So this is a very important point, because Krishna and anything transcendental cannot be approached with the material senses. In Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he would stress a certain point of our philosophy called drashta and drisya, meaning seer and the seen. Now in conditioned life, we think that we are drashta, the seer, and everything outside of us is the seen, or the objects. We're the subject, and everything else, everyone else is the objects. And we're darshan, we're seeing them. But actually, this is in the contaminated stage of life, because actually, there's only one drashta, and that's Krishna. Krishna is the actual seer, and we're actually all seen by him. We're the drisya. And this is a very important point, because also Krishna and his devotees, they cannot be approached with material senses. So Garga Muni, it's stated here, is adhokshaja, not perceived by material senses. So in this conditioned stage of life, we're thinking that we're the center of this universe, we're the subject. Everything else is for our enjoyment. But Krishna is the real enjoyer. And those who are pure devotees are on the same transcendental platform as Krishna. And so, drashta and drisha and darshan, to actually see a spiritual person, we have to start with the ears. The ears prepare the eyes. So a spiritual person, they should be approached just as Krishna should be approached, trying to understand them with our ears rather than our eyes, not trying to see them. And so this is why Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur stressed this so much, the seer and the seen, that one should not try to see Krishna. One should try to work in such a way that Krishna will want to see you. Darshan, having darshan of the Lord, is very auspicious. We're not trying to put that down. But even higher than that is trying to serve Krishna. So, Ata Sri Krishna Namadi na bhaved grayam indriyai sevan mukhe hi jivado swayam eva spratyada. By hearing and chanting, one starts with hearing and chanting. That's also how these saintly persons have to be approached. The sadhu cannot be seen with material eyes. They have to be submissively, one has to approach them and hear from them submissively and serve them. And then the sadhu will glance upon us, give us their mercy, and then we'll be able to understand who we are and what we're doing in this material world, trying to go back home, back to Godhead. And so drashta and drishya, the seer and the seen, going back to how we think we're the subject and everything is objects. Today is a very great holiday in American civilization known as Black Friday, where hundreds and hundreds of people are fighting each other just to get material objects. Because they're thinking, I am the subject, everything else are objects that are meant to be enjoyed by me. And sometimes people upload videos showing people just stampeding and fighting each other so much that security guards and policemen have to get involved because they're fighting over a toy for their child or a TV that's on discount. And this is the civilization that we're living in, that people don't understand who they are and what the relationship to the material world is. This is called conditioned life. So drashta, they're thinking that they're the seer and the objects are their enjoyment. Bhogaishvarya prasaktanam taya parita chetasam. That people who are enamored by the bhoga and aishvarya of this material world, they can nasamadau navidiyate. They cannot properly enter into any type of spiritual life or samadhi, because they're enamored by these bhoga and aishvarya, these objects of pleasure, and aishvarya, the opulence that you could achieve in the so-called American dream. Dhyayato vishayan pungsa sanghasteshu bhajayate. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment. From attachment, lust develops. From lust, anger. And so we see today that people are doing severe austerities and penances just to get a discount price at Walmart and all these other stores. And it's a very crazy society. But samskritam, this is why samskritam is so important. Gargamuni, being a saintly person, a dhokshaja, he's going to different households and giving his mercy and performing the purificatory process for the children. This is so important, the samskritam. So we know that there's different samskars that one should undergo, Garbhadan samskara and so many others. Technically there's 48 different samskars that one should do to purify their life. In this purificatory process, it creates persons who will take to Krishna consciousness, who will take to spiritual life. That's why the samskritam is so important, the samskars. Samskars also means impressions in one's mind. So samskars from the beginning of birth, or even before beginning, there's the Garbhadan samskara that the man and wife undertake to produce quality children that will not only be spiritual themselves, but they'll help others also engage in spiritual life. But then in this life, we have to be careful because samskars, the impressions in the mind, anything that we do, anything that we say, creates impressions in our mind, and we can get locked in bad habits. And so this purificatory process breaks those bad habits. And the greatest purificatory process is diksha, taking initiation from a spiritual master. And in yesterday's purport, Srila Prabhupada talks about this varnashram dharma, daiva varnashram dharma, specifically stating that Brahman means Vaishnav. And so Gargamuni, being a saintly person in previous purports, to even understand who spiritual people are, how to take shelter of them, one has to be trained up. Srila Prabhupada talks about that in text 4 purport, how there has to be training in the Varnashram society. That's all about training so that one can actually take shelter of spiritual personalities. So we see the culture of Vrindavan here, the culture of Vedic society, is that there's these purificatory process so that the younger people, they can take diksha, they can take shelter of spiritual life and then help others. So in the purport today, talks about how it may be argued that although Gargamuni was the priest of the Yadu dynasty, Nanda Maharaj also belonged to that dynasty. Does anybody remember how Nanda Maharaj and Vasudeva are related? half-brothers. So in chapter 5, text 20, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains this clearly, and how there was a great kshatriya named Devamidha. Devamidha lived in Mathura, and he had 2 wives. One was a kshatriya wife, and one was a Vaishya wife. So from the kshatriya wife, Surasen was born, and Surasen is the father of Vasudeva. And from the Vaishya wife, Devamidha, he had a son named Parjanya. And Parjanya, he went to live in Nandishvar. He became a Vaishya. And in Nandishvar, it stated that he lived there for some time. And he was actually, took shelter of Narada Muni. Narada Muni told him to worship Lakshmi Narayan and perform great austerities and penances, and you will have great 5 great children. So after performing austerities and penances, Parjanya, he had 5 sons: Upananda, Abhinanda, Nanda, Sananda, and Nandana. Nanda Maharaj, it was stated that he is the greatest of all the 5 sons, the middle son. He's the greatest because his son is Krishna. So these are the 5 sons of Parjanya. And Parjanya, Srila Rupa Goswami, he talks about how Parjanya is named Parjanya because he showers nectar. He showers nectar through his dynasty. Parjanya means cloud, so one who showers nectar. And it's stated that he has white hair, white beard, and he wears white, but he has a golden complexion. This is Parjanya. So the 6 Goswamis, they've given us a clear picture of Vrindavan. There's not just a few personalities that live in Vrindavan. No, the Vrindavan is filled with so many different personalities that we can meditate on for our purification. So a complete description of Parjanya is given by Srila Rupa Goswami, along with Upananda, Abhinanda, Nanda, Sananda, Nandana, who their children are, how many cows they have. Upananda actually has more cows than Nanda Maharaj. Nanda Maharaj has 900,000 cows. Upananda has more. So there's so many personalities. There's so much life in Vrindavan. It's not just some static place that we meditate on here and there. It's actually filled with so many intricate personalities and relationships. And by meditating on that, we can purify our life. Just by meditating on Parjanya Maharaj, the grandfather of Krishna. And so Nanda Maharaj states here that he belonged to the dynasty. So he is the, what do you say, half-brother of Vasudeva in Vedic terms. So it says here that if I act as your priest, this will confirm that Krishna is the son of Devaki. And as we've read previously, Srila Prabhupada stresses in the purports of Krishna's birth, quoting from Harivamsa and many other literatures, that Krishna was simultaneously born from Devaki and Yashoda. But by performing this purificatory process outright, Kamsa, who was already searching for Krishna, he would know that, oh, here is the child who will kill me. And then there will be catastrophe, even more so in the land of Vrindavan. And so they wanted to try and hide the fact that Krishna was also the son of Devaki. So they were going to do this purificatory process in a private place. And also in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, there's a similar pastime as this, where an astrologer comes to see Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila chapter 17, talks about how there was one day an astrologer came who was said to know everything past, present, and future. The Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu received him with all honor and put this question before him. And the purport is actually quite amazing. I would like to read it for you. That Srila Prabhupada talks about how Brahmins generally used to become astrologers. Archita Prabhu was talking the other day about how it's interesting how Srila Prabhupada, and sometimes he would kind of neglect astrology. He definitely wouldn't stress it. But in purports here and there, it seems that Prabhupada stresses astrology sometimes. So generally, definitely it's an individual thing to see if you can find a bona fide astrologer and if astrology can actually help you in your Krishna consciousness. But Srila Prabhupada states that Brahmins generally used to become astrologers, Ayurvedic physicians, teachers, and priests. Although highly learned and respectable, such Brahmins went from door to door to distribute their knowledge. A Brahmin would first go to a householder's home to give information about the functions to be performed on a particular tithi or date. But if there were sickness in the family members would consult the Brahmin as a physician, and the Brahmin would give instruction and some medicine. Often, since the Brahmins were expert in astrology, people would also be greatly inquisitive about their past, present, and future. So Brahmins would be astrologers, Ayurvedic physicians, teachers, and priests. Although the Brahmana appeared at Lord Chaitanya's house as a beggar, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu received him with great respect because he was a qualified Brahmin who knew the astrological science perfectly. Although Brahmins would go door to door just like beggars, they were honored as very respectable guests. This was the system in Hindu society 500 years ago during the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. The system was current even 100 years ago, even 50 or 60 years ago when we were children. Such Brahmins would visit householders like humble beggars, and people would derive great benefit from the mercy of such Brahmins. The greatest benefit was that a householder could save a great deal of money from being spent on doctor bills because the Brahmins, aside from explaining the past, present, and future, could ordinarily cure all kinds of diseases simply by giving instructions and some medicine. Thus, no one was bereft of the benefit of a first-class physician, astrologer, and priest. The important members of ISKCON should give careful attention to our Dala school where children are being taught Sanskrit and English to become perfect Brahmins. If they are actually trained as perfect Brahmins, they can save society from rogues and ruffians. Indeed, people can live happily under the protection of qualified Brahmins. So it seemed here Srila Prabhupada was really stressing that children be trained as Brahmins in our society. And as stated in the purport yesterday, Brahmin means Vaishnav. It means this ISKCON is a preaching movement. So Lord Chaitanya, he was visited by this astrologer, and he put forth the question to the astrologer, who was I in my previous life? So the astrologer, he did the calculations and he meditated. It wasn't like Archita Prabhu, he pointed out that it's not that certain astrologers, they just look at the mechanics of the astrology, but this astrologer, he looked at the mechanics, but then he also went into deep meditation, trying to fully understand the whole, the chart of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so when he was in meditation, he saw that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his previous life was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he became bewildered. This is the Supreme Personality of Godhead before me. How is it that he's before me? He couldn't understand what was going on. He was going into bewilderment. And so he told Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I've seen it clearly. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he laughed. And he said, actually, in my previous life, I was just a cowherd boy. Because I was taking care of the cows and calves, this birth I was able to be born as a Brahmin. And so the astrologer, he could actually see that the Lord was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is the benefit of trying to incorporate this Vedic science, Daiva Varnashram Dharma, into our lives. Those who are householders, we should take it very seriously to try and train up our children in Krishna consciousness so that they can also help the movement and help others try to be Krishna conscious. As Vijay and Archita Prabhu gave really beautiful classes this week about how this movement is a preaching movement. You know, especially today, people, they're just struggling to get some material objects for half the cost, which will be stripped from them at the time of death. They're trying so hard to become happy in this material world, which is complete fallacy. It's like the fish being out of water. Sarvapadi vinir muktam tat padatvena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhaktir uchate, that we're covered with all these different upadis, these false designations, man, woman, black, white, Indian, American, so many different things that are put on our consciousness that we're trying to falsely identify with, rather than understanding Jiver Swarupahoy Krishna Nityadas, that we're the eternal servants of Krishna, and that's where real happiness is in bhakti, devotional service. That's where the true happiness is. And so we should try to preach in any capacity we can. There's always discussions on how we can preach through book distribution, prasadam distribution, deity service. There's so many different ways of engaging our senses in the service of the Lord to help others also become Krishna conscious. And sometimes also, it's interesting, working in the restaurant so long, we meet so many different personalities. And some of them, they want to know about the philosophy. They're eager to take books. Some are complete atheists that don't want anything to do with religion, but yet they come every day to take prasadam. And they like the chanting, they like the devotees, but they claim that they're complete atheists. And the amazing thing is that sometimes preaching just means to be nice to some people. When people come in, you're nice to them, they're like, wow, nobody treats me like this in the material world. How are these people so happy? How are these people so nice? And just by being nice to people, not just preaching them, you're not this body, surrender to Krishna now, but just by trying to be nice to them, they can engage in Krishna consciousness in ways that they never thought possible. But so there's so many different ways to preach Krishna consciousness. And sometimes, even if we just parrot the philosophy, it can have such an impact on people's lives. And I heard this story recently that I don't know how old it is, but it really struck my heart. That there was a family living in Detroit, and their son had asthma very badly, and he was around 15 years old, and they were living in Detroit, and they had a parrot that they trained to chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. But the parrot, they said that it would chant like Hare Krishna very, very clearly. And so the 15-year-old boy, he came home from school one day and he had this severe asthma attack. And he actually fell unconscious. He stopped breathing. The father lifted him up, ran him outside. They took him to the hospital, and he was unconscious for some hours. And then all of a sudden, he woke up and he saw his dad, and he said, "I had the most amazing dream. I'll tell you about it tomorrow." And then he went back to sleep. So the next day, the son, he revealed that when he fell unconscious, he had this dream that he was standing on top of a building, on the edge of a building. And at that moment, he had to choose whether he had to live or just let go of life. And all of a sudden, in the background, he heard the parrot chanting Hare Krishna. And he knew, I have to live, I have to engage in devotional service. And so the boy was inspired by the parrot. Just the parrot preached to him to stay alive. So even if we parrot the philosophy, we think that we're not pure enough or we don't have realization. But even if we parrot the philosophy, it can help so many different people. So I'll stop here if there's any questions or comments. Maharaj?
generally it's understood that a Vaishnav is also a Brahmin. He has all the good qualities of a Brahmin, but he also has something else. And above and beyond being Brahmin. In other words, one graduates from being Brahmin to Vaishnav, which, as I said, includes being Brahmin. So perhaps you can clarify for us the very difference between a person who comes to the level of Brahmin and then gradually ascends to a higher level of Vaishnav. So what is the difference between a Vaishnav and a Brahmin? What is there, in other words, what is a person who is a Brahmin, what is he ascending to? What does he gain when he becomes a Vaishnav as opposed to what he is when he's a Brahmin?
Maharaj, I know that you know that answer and you could enlighten us so much more.
Huh?
I know that you could enlighten us so much more than
Well,
what I
you
can
enlighten us, and then if you can enlighten us, I'll fumble around and try to do something.
So generally for the management of the society, we know that there's the Varnashram system, the 4 Varnas, Brahman, Kshatriya, Sudra, Vaishya, Sudra. So the Brahmins are the head of the society. They're supposed to be spiritually minded. And interestingly enough, in Bhagavad Gita, when it talks about the Varnas, it gives the qualities of the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, whereas the Vaishyas and the Sudras, it gives the exact activities that they perform. But for the Brahmins and the Kshatriyas, it doesn't really talk about their exact activities. For the Kshatriya, they have heroism, chivalry. And the Brahmins, they have peacefulness, cleanliness. So they're the heads of the society. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, it does state that if one is just a Brahmin, but not a Vaishnav, then it's Shramva Evahi Kevalam, it's complete waste of time.
What?
If you're a Brahmin but you're not a Vaishnav, then if you're engaging in the activities of the Varnashram system but you're not a devotee, then it's a complete waste. But the, what's the verse? Aho batasva pachato gariyan, that one who, even if they're a Chandala, they're a Vaishnav, even if they're a dog eater and they're a devotee, then they're higher than a Brahmin. And then I forget the other verse where it talks about how if a Brahmin is not a devotee, he can't even save his own family, what to speak of save himself. Whereas a dog eater who's a devotee, he can save the entire world. So when Srila Prabhupada talks about in the purport yesterday, when Satchidananda Prabhu gave class, talks about Brahmin means Vaishnav, we should understand when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, there was a great assembly where these Brahmins, they were looking down on the Vaishnavas, claiming that the Brahmins were even higher than the Vaishnavas. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, using the scriptures, talks about how a Vaishnav is automatically a Brahmin. They're automatically a Brahmin. But somebody who's a Brahmin and not a devotee, it's very low. Maybe somebody can...
I'd just like to add one point to what you said, which is very nice. One of the characteristic differences that I noticed is that a Brahmin, he may perform all the different duties of a Brahmin, the prescribed duties. But the question is what is the attitude with which he performs those duties? He may do them in a rather perfunctory or mechanical way, simply, this is my duty as a Brahmin, and he does them perfectly, and no one has any fault with everything that he's doing. He goes through he can perform all the samskaras perfectly, but his attitude may be simply just to do the duty well, and that's it. Whereas when we come to a Vaishnava, we come to a higher level. I'm doing this duty as a love offering to Krishna. Now, why am I doing it as a love offering to Krishna? To primarily increase my love for Krishna. In fact, all my duties are for that purpose, as the verse says, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu must be performed, otherwise work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, performing prescribed duty for his satisfaction. So that is the characteristic difference, is that the Vaishnava is always thinking of the satisfaction or the pleasure of Krishna, as opposed to merely a Brahmin who may not have that in mind, but may be slowly through his process of the rituals evolving to that particular position, or he may not evolve if he's very puffed up and arrogant and very conceited. That was, to me, the most important thing.
Archita Prabhu. Oh. Kaliya Krishna is, when I was researching this morning, it says that there's two Kal Krishna Dasas. There's one that went to South India and fell down in the association of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but this specific Kaliya Krishna Das today that we're observing the disappearance day of, he is known as Lavanga. He's one of the 12 Gopals, and he's a very intimate associate of Lord Nityananda. There's not a lot of information given, but it's stated that just by remembering him, one can become Krishna conscious. But otherwise, he was in Janava Mata's Sankirtan party, and then there's nothing else really. But he was the Gopal Lavanga. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki.
This calm desire tree, is this a bona fide? Because I just Googled this. This calm desire tree.